Talk about the time Tony Stark got revenge for Miles Morales. But we see Tony helping Spider-Man out in Brooklyn trying to stop a random Moloid invasion. You see, Moloids haven't invaded New York City in a very long time, and it turns out that this generation of Moloids have never been there at all and never seen it. These little guys were just here as tourists, so to keep them contained, Tony just rolls in a bunch of tour buses and food trucks to give them the authentic New York City tourist experience. As the two are sharing a meal, Miles starts talking about his problems and asks Tony if he's ever heard of a guy called the Assessor. Miles explains that the Assessor had kidnapped him. He started running tests on him frivolously. He ran him until his heart was ready to explode. He gassed him, froze him, shocked him, cut him. He told Miles he was going to test him until his body gave out, and then when it did, he was going after his family next. And with a tear running down his face, he says his dad and uncle were able to save him, but those guys are still out there somewhere. And while he'd never heard of him before, Tony gets up to leave and says, "You know, kid, this sounds like somebody I want to meet." As the Armored Avengers starts investigating the situation, he realizes these guys are smart and they have good tech, but Tony is smarter and his tech is even better. He thinks to himself that his strongest suit is literally a strong suit. He's fast, unstoppable, impenetrable, and most of all, invincible. And there's people kidnapping kids in his backyard, and he's about to remind everybody of that. As Tony gets a location and starts heading towards the building, which arrogantly enough, even after being busted up by Miles' dad and uncle, was still located in Brooklyn, he thinks to himself how he kept the conversation light in front of Miles, but Tony knows a little something about being kidnapped himself. The only difference is he was a man, not a kid. And as he busts through the building, screaming the Assessor's name to the top of his lungs, you understand that Tony's anger is at an all-time high. Now, the invincible Iron Man starts blasting his way through the goons as if they were nothing. As they lay on the ground moaning and groaning, he tells them that they're lucky that Spider-Man isn't friends with the Punisher. And while he's waltzing through the building, a full frontal attack and all this bravado isn't exactly the technically sound thing to do, but Tony still is a smart guy. As his Manhunter drones hover outside, he's going to catch anybody as they try and leave the building, as Tony's going to roll over this entire operation. On top of that, Stark knew that the Assessor wasn't going to leave. It's all in the name. He wants to assess Iron Man himself. Sure enough, the Assessor starts putting Tony through the ringer. He starts running trials on him, but unfortunately for him, Tony's working through them pretty seamlessly, and all the while taunting the Assessor while he's doing it. Tony has built this suit. He knows what it's capable of. He could blast his way out of any one of these trials at any given moment, but he doesn't know exactly where he is, and if he's still in Brooklyn, he could hurt somebody outside the building. But more importantly, Tony's fighting his way through these tests because he wants to get face to face with the Assessor. He thinks to himself, it's like the cave all over again, only this time it's not in some far off land. It's right here in Brooklyn. The Assessor is taking kids into that cave and taking what he wants from them. Tony says he deserved to be in that cave. He made tools that killed people. Tony was just as much of a warlord as his captor was. The only difference is that guy didn't lie to himself about it. And as Tony finally busts through the final wall into the room with the Assessor and his asset Quantum, he thinks to himself that Spider-Man is different. He's a good kid. He's going to be a good man. He doesn't have what it takes to burn an entire operation like this to the ground, but Tony does. It's what he does. It's right there in his foundational trauma. Burning bunkers is what he does. As he's facing Quantum, he pairs his teleportation signal with his suit, and Tony tells him that they're locked in a quantum entanglement. As he hits him with a repulsor blast, sending him flying across the room, he tells him, "Now you're not going anywhere." And finally, Stark is face to face with the Assessor as he tells him he took all of this beating just to look him in the eyes. Now he wants to know how he feels. The Assessor is glitching and stuttering and saying data inconsistent, as Iron Man's theory has been confirmed that the Assessor is an AI. So he dropped a couple of bots on the way into the building's infrastructure, and it hacked into the system and caught the Assessor in a nasty little viral web. He grabs his robotic body by the throat. He says, "Go on, try and broadcast yourself out of there. You can't, can you?" All the Assessor can say is impossible, inconceivable. Tony tells him no, invincible, remember that, as he slams him into the ground. He tells the Assessor that you're my prisoner now, and I've got a special cave made just for you to keep you in until you tell me what I want to know. As the Assessor is screaming no and begging for his life and his freedom, Tony tells him that he's downloading his consciousness into his suit. He's downloading him into his system and showing the Assessor his new home.